The sky over the Amazon is no longer blue, it is a bruised, suffocating gray. People in Siberia are watching the ground beneath their homes turn into a bubbling soup of ancient mud and trapped gases. This is not a drill. This is not a preview of some distant dystopian future. This is the reality of 2026. We are living through the opening credits of the planet's final act as we know it. The question is no longer when it will happen, but whether we are the first species to document our own extinction in high definition. We are witnessing the breakdown of systems that have remained stable for 10,000 years, and we are doing it with a front row seat. If you find these insights vital for our future, please subscribe and join our community. Now our journey into the heart of the crisis begins. Look up. When you stare into the night sky, you are looking at a vast silent graveyard. For decades, we have aimed our most powerful telescopes at the stars, hunting for a twin, a mirror, a second chance. We have found thousands of planets. Some are giants made of gas, others are frozen rocks, and some are oceans of liquid metal. We talk about the Goldilocks zone as if it is a common real estate listing in the galaxy, a place where it is not too hot and not too cold for liquid water to exist. But we are realizing, with a terrifying clarity, that being in the right place is not enough. To have a planet where you can walk out of a ship and breathe, where the soil doesn't poison you and the sun doesn't fry your DNA, is a statistical miracle that we have taken for granted. We inhabit a thin, fragile skin of life wrapped around a rock, protected by a magnetic shield we cannot see, and an atmosphere that is thinner than the skin of an apple compared to its size. In the vastness of the Milky Way, with its 400 billion stars, we are, as far as we can tell, completely and utterly alone. This isn't just a scientific observation, it is a philosophical weight. If we are the only spark of consciousness in this sector of the universe, then our failure to protect this planet isn't just a local tragedy, it is a cosmic crime. Consider our neighbors, the ghosts of what could have been. To our left is Venus, a planet almost identical to Earth in size and composition. Billions of years ago it might have had shallow oceans and a temperate climate. But Venus took a different path. A runaway greenhouse effect turned its atmosphere into a heavy, toxic blanket of carbon dioxide. Today, the surface temperature on Venus is over 860 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt lead. Its pressure is 90 times that of Earth, equivalent to being a mile under the ocean. It is a world where it rains sulfuric acid and the air is a thick, yellow haze. Venus is our warning. It is the end point of an atmosphere that loses its balance, a mirror showing us what happens when the carbon cycle breaks beyond repair. Then look to our right at Mars. Mars is our past, a cold, dead monument to a planet that lost its heart. Once Mars had a liquid iron core that generated a magnetic field, holding in a thick atmosphere and allowing water to flow across its surface. We see the dried up riverbeds, we see the ancient shorelines. No, Mars was too small. Its core cooled, its magnetic shield flickered out, and the solar wind stripped its atmosphere away, molecule by molecule. Now it is a frozen desert, sterilized by ultraviolet radiation. We live on the knife edge between these two deaths, the fire of Venus and the ice of Mars. We are the one planet that stayed balanced, but that balance was never a guarantee. It was a temporary gift of physics and biology, and we are currently dismantling the very mechanisms that maintained it. This brings us to the most haunting concept in modern astronomy, the Great Filter. It is an answer to the Fermi paradox, the question of why, if the universe is so old and so big, we haven't heard from anyone else. The Great Filter suggests that at some point in the development of life, there is a wall that almost no one clears. Perhaps it is the jump from single-celled organisms to complex life, or perhaps it is the transition from a primitive civilization to a spacefaring one. But there is a darker possibility. Perhaps the filter is ahead of us. Perhaps every civilization, once it discovers how to use the energy stored in its planet, inevitably destroys its own life support system before it can leave its home star. We look at the silence of the stars and we have to wonder, are we the first to reach this hurdle, or are we just the latest in a long line of failures? We are currently consuming the resources of 1.75 Earths every single year. We are burning through millions of years of stored solar energy in the form of fossil fuels in a mere 2 centuries. We are a species that has outgrown its cradle, but we haven't learned how to walk without breaking everything we touch. The Great Filter isn't a wall we hit, it is a trap we build for ourselves. And as the temperatures rise and the ice melts, we are feeling the jaws of that trap begin to close. The lifeblood of our world is not the oil we pump from the ground, but the water that moves through our oceans. If you want to find the pulse of the planet, you have to look at the Great Ocean Conveyor, specifically the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, or AMOC. This is a massive system of currents that acts like a global radiator. It carries warm, salty water from the tropics up to the North Atlantic, where it cools, sinks, and flows back south along the ocean floor. This single mechanism is what keeps Europe from being a frozen wasteland and prevents the tropics from becoming an unlivable furnace. It is the heartbeat of the Northern Hemisphere, but the heart is skipping beats. As the Greenland ice sheet melts at a rate of 6 billion tons of water per day, it is dumping staggering amounts of cold, fresh water into the North Atlantic. Fresh water is lighter than salt water. It doesn't sink. It sits on the surface, forming a freshwater lid that is literally stalling the engine. Scientific data from 2024 and 2025 shows that this circulation is now at its weakest point in over 1,000 years. If the AMOC collapses, and some models suggest it could happen much sooner than we once thought, the consequences would be catastrophic. We would see a sudden dramatic drop in temperatures in Europe, while the heat that is no longer being transported north would bake the southern hemisphere. Rain patterns that billions of people rely on for food would simply vanish. We are talking about a total reorganization of the world's climate, happening not over centuries, but over a few short years. While the currents slow down, the chemistry of the water itself is turning hostile. The ocean has been our greatest ally in the fight against climate change, absorbing nearly 30% of the carbon dioxide we have emitted since the Industrial Revolution. But that service comes at a horrific price. When carbon dioxide dissolves in seawater, it forms carbonic acid. This process, known as ocean acidification, is changing the fundamental chemistry of the seas faster than at any time in the last 50 million years. It is a quiet, invisible war on anything with a shell. From the massive coral reefs that provide a home for 25% of all marine life to the tiny microscopic pteropods at the base of the food chain, the acid is literally dissolving their homes. If the shells of these tiny creatures can't form, the entire marine food web collapses. We are not just talking about the loss of colorful fish for tourists to see. We are talking about the primary protein source for 3 billion people and the organisms that produce every second breath of oxygen you take. If the ocean dies, we die. There is no version of a healthy Earth that has a dead, acidic ocean. We are turning the cradle of life into a graveyard of carbonate, and once that chemical threshold is crossed, there is no way to turn it back. We cannot pour enough alkaline into the sea to fix what we have broken. As we move from the water to the land, we witness the sixth extinction, a silent slaughter that is happening right under our feet. Unlike the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs 66 million years ago, this extinction event has a name and a face: us. We are currently losing species at a rate 100 to 1,000 times higher than the natural background rate. This isn't just about losing iconic animals like the white rhino or the polar bear. This is about the annihilation of nature at the level of insects, fungi, and soil microbes. In the last 50 years, we have seen a 69% average decline in the populations of mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, and amphibians. Think about that number. More than 2/3 of the wildlife on this planet has vanished in the span of a single human lifetime. We are thinning the fabric of life until it is so frayed that it can no longer hold. We are beginning to see the linkage of loss, where the disappearance of a single species of bee or a specific type of soil bacteria triggers a cascade of failure through an entire ecosystem. When the pollinators go, the plants follow. When the plants go, the herbivores starve. When the herbivores are gone, the predators vanish. We are at the top of this pyramid, looking down as the base crumbles. We have convinced ourselves that we are separate from nature, that our technology makes us immune to the biological rules of the planet. But you cannot eat microchips, and you cannot breathe money. Earth is trying to break. The question that haunts every scientist, every philosopher, and every parent watching the news today is, where is the exit? We have spent centuries perfecting the art of extraction, but we have almost no experience in the art of restoration. We talk about sustainability as if it is a goal we can reach by buying a different kind of light bulb or driving an electric car. But true sustainability is not a lifestyle choice. It is a radical reimagining of what it means to be human on this planet. It requires us to abandon the myth of dominance and embrace the reality of interdependence. We are not the masters of this world. We are its most high-maintenance guests. Every system we rely on, From the nitrogen cycle that fertilizes our fields to the ozone layer that protects our skin is a service provided for free by a healthy biosphere. We have been living on a credit card with a limit we didn't bother to check, and the bill is coming due. The 2020s are the decade where the great acceleration meets the great reality check. We are seeing the limits of our engineering and the fragility of our social structures. When the water stops flowing from the tap and the air becomes too hot to safely breathe, the abstractions of the stock market and the distractions of the digital world will vanish in an instant. All that will be left is the raw, unforgiving reality of a planet that no longer recognizes us as part of its balance. This is the point where we have to look at the great filter again. Is it possible that we are the ones who make it through? To do so would require a shift in consciousness unlike anything in human history. It would mean moving from a world of competition to a world of cooperation. It would mean valuing a standing forest more than the timber it contains and a clean ocean more than the oil beneath its floor. We have the technology to monitor every square inch of this planet, to track the flow of every carbon molecule and the health of every coral reef. We have the information. What we lack is the collective will to act on it. We are a species with the intelligence of gods but the impulses of children. We have built a world of incredible complexity and beauty, but we have failed to build a foundation that can sustain it. The silent graveyard of the cosmos is full of civilizations that likely thought they were the exception to the rule. They likely thought their technology would save them, right up until the moment it didn't. We are currently writing our own entry into that cosmic ledger. Will we be a cautionary tale, or will we be the first ones to prove that a technological civilization can actually grow up before it burns out? As the deep currents of the ocean slow, we are forced to confront the reality of thermal inertia. For the last 50 years, the world's oceans have acted as a massive planetary sponge, absorbing over 90% of the excess heat generated by our greenhouse gas emissions. If it were not for the vast cold depths of the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Indian Oceans, the average temperature of our atmosphere would not have risen by a few degrees. It would have soared by nearly 100 degrees Fahrenheit. We have been living in a period of stolen time, protected by the sheer mass of the water that covers 7/10 of our planet. But a sponge has its limits, and the ocean is reaching its saturation point. In 2024 and 2025, marine heat waves across the North Atlantic and the Mediterranean shattered every historical record, with water temperatures in some coastal areas reaching the level of a hot tub. This isn't just an anomaly for the history books, it is a death sentence for the complex ecosystems that live within these waters. When the ocean warms, it expands, driving sea level rise that threatens every coastal city on the map. But more importantly, as it warms, it loses its ability to hold oxygen. We are seeing the expansion of dead zones, vast stretches of the ocean where oxygen levels are so low that nothing can survive. This is the hypoxia of the seas, a slow suffocation of the very cradle where life began. We have treated the ocean as an infinite sink for our heat and our waste, but we are finding that the ocean has a memory, and it is finally starting to push back. The heat we have pumped into the deep is not gone, it is simply stored, a massive debt of energy that will continue to haunt the climate for centuries, even if we were to stop all emissions tonight. This is the terrifying physics of oceanic memory. The water that is warming today at the surface will eventually sink and circulate, carrying that heat into the abyss, only to have it resurface hundreds of years from now. We are locking in a future of rising tides and shifting storms that our descendants will have to navigate long after the names of our current corporations and politicians have been forgotten, and while the heat rises, the very chemistry of the water continues its descent into acidity. This isn't a localized problem, it is a fundamental shift in the pH of the global ocean. Every time you breathe, you are participating in a cycle that is currently being disrupted. The tiny organisms known as coccolithophores, which create the white cliffs of Dover over millions of years, are now finding it harder to build their calcium carbonate skeletons. These creatures are the base of the marine food web. If they fail, the fish that feed the birds and the whales, and ultimately the 3 billion humans who rely on the sea for their primary protein, will simply vanish. We are witnessing the deconstruction of the biological architecture of the planet, starting from the smallest, most invisible foundations and working its way up to us. On land, the story is just as grim, and it begins with the hidden half of nature. We often focus on the animals we can see, the elephants, the tigers, the eagles, but the true stability of the earth is maintained by a vast invisible network of fungi, bacteria, and insects. This is the great mycelial web that connects the roots of every forest on Earth, sharing nutrients and information across miles of soil. We are currently poisoning this foundation with a cocktail of synthetic chemicals, microplastics, and heavy metals. We have introduced forever chemicals like PFAS into every corner of the globe, from the peaks of the Himalayas to the blood of polar bears in the high Arctic. These chemicals do not break down, they accumulate, disrupting the hormonal systems of every living thing they touch. We are seeing a global fertility crisis, not just in humans, but across the entire animal kingdom. This is the silent part of the sixth extinction. It isn't just about species dying, it is about the ability of life to reproduce itself being systematically dismantled. We are thinning the genetic diversity of the planet to such an extent that when a new disease or a sudden climate shift occurs, there is no biological reserve left to adapt. We are creating a world of genetic bottlenecks, where only a few highly resilient, often invasive species survive, while the intricate, specialized beauty of the natural world is ground into dust. Consider the insect apocalypse, a phenomenon that most people only notice as a cleaner windshield after a long drive. In many parts of the world, insect biomass has declined by over 75% in just the last 3 decades. This is a collapse of the foundational layer of the terrestrial food chain. Insects are the primary pollinators of the plants that feed us. They are the cleaners of the soil, the recyclers of waste, and the primary food source for thousands of species of birds, bats, and amphibians. Without them, the terrestrial world simply stops functioning. We have turned our agricultural lands into green deserts, vast monocultures of corn, soy, and wheat, drenched in neonicotinoid pesticides that are thousands of times more toxic to bees than the chemicals we used in the mid-20th century. We are trading the long-term stability of the biosphere for short-term caloric yields. But you cannot have agriculture without a functioning ecosystem. We are reaching the point where the services provided by nature for free, pollination, water filtration, pest control, are being lost. The cost of replacing these services with technology is infinite. There is no machine that can replace the work of 1 trillion bees, and there is no filter that can clean the water as effectively as a healthy forest. This leads us back to the Arctic, the canary in the coal mine, for the entire planet. The Arctic is not just a distant land of ice and bears, it is the world's air conditioner. The white surface of the sea ice reflects about 80% of the sun's energy back into space. As that ice melts and is replaced by dark, open water, that water absorbs 90% of the sun's energy. This is a massive albedo flip that accelerates the warming of the entire planet. This is why the Arctic is warming 4 times faster than the global average. We are seeing the emergence of zombie fires, wildfires that burn underground in the carbon-rich peat, surviving through the winter under the snow, only to flare up again in the spring. These fires are releasing carbon that has been sequestered for thousands of years, creating another feedback loop that we are powerless to stop. In 2026, the heat dome phenomenon has become a terrifyingly common phrase in the weather forecast. These are massive systems of high pressure that trap heat over a region for weeks at a time, baking the ground and killing people by the thousands. We are seeing temperatures in places like British Columbia and the American Pacific Northwest that rival the hottest deserts on Earth. The infrastructure of our civilization, the roads that melt, the power grids that fail, the crops that wither, was never designed for this level of heat. We are living in a world that has moved outside the climatic envelope in which all of human history took place. And then there is the third pole, the massive glaciers of the Himalayas, the Hindu Kush, and the Tibetan Plateau. These glaciers are the source of the 10 largest rivers in Asia, including the Ganges, the Indus, the Yangtze, and the Mekong. They provide the water security for nearly 2 billion people. As these glaciers melt at an accelerating rate, we are seeing a double-edged sword of catastrophe. In the short term, the increased meltwater leads to devastating glacial lake outburst floods, where entire mountainsides are washed away in a matter of minutes. But in the long term, once the glaciers are gone, those rivers will run dry during the summer months. This is a blueprint for a humanitarian disaster on a scale we have never witnessed. We are looking at the potential for water wars between nuclear-armed nations as the life-giving flow from the mountains begins to flicker and fade. The stability of the 21st century depends on the ice of the 20th century, and that ice is disappearing before our eyes. We must also talk about the wet bulb effect, a term that is becoming a grim part of our daily vocabulary. A wet bulb temperature of 95 degrees Fahrenheit at 100% humidity is the absolute limit of human survivability. At this point, the human body can no longer shed heat by sweating. Your core temperature rises until your organs shut down. It is a biological wall. For most of human history, these conditions were almost non-existent on Earth. But in the last 5 years, we have begun to see wet bulb events in the Persian Gulf, in Pakistan, and in parts of Mexico. We are moving toward a future where entire regions of the planet, places where hundreds of millions of people currently live, will become physiologically uninhabitable for parts of the year. This isn't about being uncomfortable in the heat. It is about the impossibility of existing without constant industrial-scale air conditioning. If the power grid fails during a wet bulb event, it becomes a mass casualty event on the scale of a nuclear strike. This is the reality of the climate we are creating. We are pushing the planet toward a state that our own biology is not equipped to handle. The Great Acceleration is the term scientists use to describe the period since 1950, where every metric of human activity, population, water use, fertilizer consumption, international travel, began an exponential climb. But on a finite planet, exponential curves always end in a crash. We have treated the Earth's systems as if they were linear and predictable, but they are non-linear and full of tipping points. A tipping point is a threshold where a small change triggers a massive, self-sustaining shift in the state of the system. Think of it like a boulder sitting at the top of a hill. You can push it a little bit, and it stays there. You push it a little more, and it moves an inch. But once you push it past the crest, it doesn't matter if you stop pushing. The boulder is going to the bottom of the hill, and there is nothing you can do to stop it. We are currently poking the dragon of at least 16 different planetary tipping points, from the collapse of the West Antarctic ice sheet to the death of the boreal forests. Several of these may have already been crossed. This is why the state of anxiety we discussed at the beginning is so profound. We intuitively feel that the ground is shifting beneath us, that the rules we lived by for generations no longer apply. Our economic systems are fundamentally at odds with the laws of thermodynamics. We have built a world that requires infinite extraction to maintain infinite growth, but we live on a planet that has hard physical limits. We are currently mining the soil of its nutrients, the oceans of their life, and the atmosphere of its stability to produce wealth that is increasingly concentrated in the hands of a few, while the ecological debt is shared by everyone. We have externalized the costs of our lifestyle onto the future. Every gallon of gasoline burned, every plastic bottle discarded, and every acre of forest cleared is a withdrawal from a bank account that is now overdrawn. The resource curse isn't just about developing nations with oil and diamonds. It is the curse of a global civilization that has forgotten how to live as part of a biological system. We have replaced wealth with waste, and we are now finding that the waste is coming back to haunt us in the form of toxins in our blood and fire in our skies. When we look at the techno-fossil layer that will define our era in the geological record, we have to ask ourselves, is this the legacy we wanted? 1,000,000 years from now, the radioactive isotopes from our nuclear tests, the layer of soot from our industrial fires, and the trillions of bits of microplastic will be the golden spike that marks the Anthropocene. We will be the first species to leave a global, recognizable signature that is almost entirely composed of trash. But it doesn't have to be this way. The great filter is not an inevitability, it is a choice. The tragedy of our situation is that we have the knowledge. We know exactly why the Earth is warming. We know exactly why the species are dying. We have the maps, the data, and the models. We even have the solutions: renewable energy, regenerative agriculture, circular economies. The barrier is not technical, it is psychological and political. We are a species that is hardwired to respond to immediate physical threats. A predator in the grass, a rival tribe at the border. We are not well equipped to respond to a slow-motion, invisible catastrophe that requires us to change everything about how we live. We are struggling to overcome our own evolutionary programming to save our own future. In 2026, we are seeing the rise of climate realism, a movement that acknowledges the scale of the disaster without falling into total nihilism. It is the understanding that we are going to lose much of what we love, but that there is still something worth fighting for. We are in a triage situation for the planet. We have to decide which systems we can still save and which ones we must prepare to lose. This is the hardest work humans have ever had to do. It requires us to look at the Amazon tipping point or the methane bomb and not turn away in despair, but to use that fear as fuel for a radical transformation. We are the generation that happens to be alive at the most critical moment in the 10,000-year history of human civilization. Everything we do in the next 10 years will echo for the next 10,000. We are the architects of the deep future, whether we want to be or not. Every ton of carbon we keep in the ground today is a gift to 1,000 generations of humans who haven't been born yet. The Great Ocean Conveyor is a perfect metaphor for our current situation. It is a slow, massive, and incredibly powerful system that provides the stability we need to survive. But once it starts to stall, it is incredibly difficult to restart. We are currently braking the systems of the planet, and we are finding that the brakes are smoking and the tires are blowing out. We are moving too fast, consuming too much, and thinking too little about the consequences. The atmospheric rivers that are now dumping months' worth of rain in a few days are the atmosphere's way of trying to redistribute the immense energy we have trapped. The superstorms that are becoming more frequent are the Earth's way of trying to find a new equilibrium. But that equilibrium might not have a place for us. The planet will eventually reach a new steady state, as it always has. It might be a hothouse Earth state, similar to what existed during the time of the dinosaurs, or it might be something entirely new. But the transition to that new state will be a period of chaos and suffering that will dwarf anything in the recorded history of our species. We have to confront the reality that our economic engine is running on a fuel of pure delusion. We have built a global civilization on the premise that we can take from the earth forever and give nothing back. This is the ultimate resource curse. We look at our gross domestic product and see growth, but we fail to see that every percentage point of that growth is a withdrawal from the biological capital of the planet. Take, for example, the very ground beneath our feet. Modern industrial agriculture has treated the topsoil like a bottomless bank account. We have doused the land in synthetic fertilizers and pesticides to wring out every last calorie of yield, but in doing so, we have killed the complex microbial life that actually makes soil alive. We are currently losing 36 billion tons of fertile soil every single year. At this rate, we have fewer than 60 harvests left before the land becomes nothing more than sterile dust. We are repeating the mistakes of the Dust Bowl on a global, irreversible scale. We are trading the food security of our grandchildren for the quarterly profits of massive corporations, and we are doing it with a smile on our faces. This isn't just a failure of policy, it is a failure of imagination. We cannot imagine a world where more isn't better, even as more is the very thing that is killing us. Think about the sheer impossibility of your existence. You are a collection of atoms that were forged in the hearts of dying stars billions of years ago. Those atoms have spent eons drifting through the void, only to come together in this specific arrangement, on this specific planet, at this specific moment in history. You are the universe observing itself. You are the conscious edge of 4 billion years of evolution. To throw that away for the sake of a few more decades of business as usual isn't just a mistake. It is a betrayal of the stars that birthed you. We have a cosmic responsibility to not be the reason the great filter remains silent. We have the potential to be the species that brings the spark of life to the rest of the galaxy, but we can't do that if we burn our own house down before we even learn how to leave the front porch. The cosmic oases we search for in the distance are nothing compared to the one we are currently standing on. Earth is the only place in the known universe where a child can look at a flower and wonder why. That wonder is worth everything. It is worth the struggle, the sacrifice, and the radical change required to keep it alive. As we reach the final minutes of this journey, look around you. The world is still beautiful. The blue marble still glows in the dark. The great ocean conveyor is still moving, however slowly. The Amazon is still breathing, however heavily. The methane is still mostly locked under the ice. We are in the golden hour of our civilization. The light is beautiful, but the shadows are long, and the sun is setting on the world we once knew. What happens next depends on what we do when the cameras stop rolling and the digital screens go dark. It depends on whether we can look each other in the eye and admit that we were wrong and that we are ready to try something new. The Earth is waiting for us to grow up. It is waiting for us to stop being masters and start being members of the biological community. The silence of the stars is a challenge, not a fate. We can be the exception. We can be the civilization that saw the wall and decided to build a ladder instead. The choice is yours, the choice is ours, and the clock is ticking.